Hi, everybody. This is Jose Palomino with another episode of the Revenue Throughput Podcast. And today's guest is Chris Westfall of Westfall Online. And Chris is a specialist in leadership communication, but especially in the power of story. Now, listen closely because there's some great insights here. Chris is going to tell us about his new book, as well as how it's going to loosen the bowstrings if you're in leadership, if you're an owner, if you find that it's all getting a little bit hard, then listen closely and we'll look at how it can get easier for you. So let's welcome Chris Westfall to our show. Well, welcome, Chris, to the Revenue Throughput Podcast.
Thank you so much, Jose. It's great to be here.
So, Chris, as my listeners know, I always like to ask our guests right up front in their own words, what do you do primarily? You probably do a number of things. What do you do primarily? And who do you do it for? Let's start off there, and then we'll see where the conversation takes us.
I would say what I do is I'm a storyteller. Sometimes I tell my own stories, and most of the time, though, I'm helping other people to tell theirs. And I've had a great deal of success in helping business owners to go out and raise money for their businesses and to experience some unprecedented growth. And I wish I could say that that's all due to my brilliance, but I have some really, really talented clients and people that I work with. And typically that's who I serve. People who are highly successful in their careers, but they're looking for something more. They ask themselves this question quite often: is this all there is?
Gotcha.
And there's nothing wrong with wanting more, wanting to be more, wanting to create a greater impact, and making that happen, whatever that impact might be, always gets easier when you have a second set of eyes and ears and someone that can provide some guidance on the true nature of performance and showing up at your best. So that's a little bit about what I do. And I provide storytelling guidance that really seems to provide insight into those areas.
Wow. And I love the idea. I love the power story. Just, the narrative, just what it is. I mean, I'm a big, like I've since a little kid loved the movies, all kinds of all genres. And I know that's not limiting that to, not saying you're writing scripts, but in a sense, it's that idea of we all like a good adventure, or we like a good love story, and so on. So tell me, when you work with an owner for the first time and they hear, okay, Chris, storytelling, I make a giant machine that does this or that, for industry or something. How does story play into the world of somebody who feels they're doing something rugged and like real and substantive? Isn't that more for like, if I was a therapist, that would be a storytelling thing. How does it apply?
You've said it yourself, Jose. We all love a good story. And telling a story about your business is simply a creative way of expressing the rugged, real, and reality of what it is that you offer to the world. I just had a coaching conversation before this call with an organization that is trying to create an impact, and it's an impact around some environmental concerns, and they have a product that helps to reduce waste. So it's a sustainability initiative. And instead of talking about concepts around sustainability and hitting people upside the head with statistics, which instantly bores people, by the way, I have some statistics on that I'll share with you in a moment, except it's boring, so I won't. But anyway, the thing is that we saw in our conversation was what happens if there's a story of how this waste, and I won't go into the details of their particular product, but how this waste is created. And what if it's a story of one to many? In other words, it's the story of one individual. Maybe his name is Trevor. Maybe her name is Tina. I don't know, but it's one individual who has one set of behaviors, and that set of behaviors is duplicated hundreds of thousands of times each day across the United States, creating this waste product. So it's a one to many approach, which for me works better because we can relate to Tina or Trevor. We can relate to a character in a story. And it's not a fictitious, I mean, it's a little bit fictitious, but it's a real representation of behavior that's happening. And what happens for an audience, whether that audience is customers or investors or any market that you serve, what happens is they see themselves in that story, just as we see ourselves in the characters that we love in movies and books and that sort of thing. So they see an aspect of human nature that creates a greater connection to our own humanity. And the serving humanity is why the big machines exist, why the AI exists, why the software exists. It is to improve life for all humans. And so if that is really at the heart of the story, why not start there? Why not start with that human aspect? And that's not a touchy-feely or therapy approach to business. It's actually an approach that works and works most effectively. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I spent just about my entire career in B2B, right? Marketing, sales, and starting out in technology. And there is a logical part to a B2B buying decision at some level, but there's a whole lot of just a feeling, a trust issue, of understanding issue. And the more complex the product, the smaller the window to really make an impression and connect with real understanding, like, that would really be helpful, that moment. And so without story, like you said, if you just start with stats and other things, it's an abstraction. I'll let somebody else read that for me, tell me what they think. Even there, I'm actually saying, so Joe, what do you think we should do? I'm really asking somebody to take that abstraction and make it something I can relate to. I can relate to Joe's opinion, who's somebody I trust. You still want to bring it down to the human level. So I totally get where that's coming from, Chris. And brought to mind a book that really did a lot to change in industry probably 30 years ago. An Israeli scientist, Elihu Goldratt, wrote The Goal.
The Goal, 100%. Love it. Yeah.
And in a novel, no less, right? And it's actually a page turner. It was well written as a novel, but it taught the world about supply chains. And maybe people don't want, they took some of the wrong lessons from that. Like, he does talk about you need a buffer, but people forgot that part, But anyway, so story is important. Now, talking about books, you have a book that you've recently written, and it's being published, I think, by Wiley. I understand it, and tell us about that, because I think it ties into this whole thing about what you started with, about how people can have impact in this world, even if they're busy running a business.
Well, it's a book that's written in the same style as The Goal, because it's a story. And I actually, that was one of the books that I benchmarked and that I read and researched for mine. The book is called Easier, because I believe that that's what everyone wants right now in this day and age, is for life to be easier.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you can't, life may not be easy though. You know what I'm saying? Some things in life are not easy. Running a B2B organization, not easy, but there's a way to go about that as an owner, as a chief executive officer, that makes that experience easier, not only for the owner himself or herself, but also for the employees and for the customers. Easier always exists. Maybe not easy, but easier does. And that's why I wrote this book called Easier. And it is a story. It is a business fable about a client and a coach. And the client is frustrated. He's frustrated at work, like millions of Americans right now.
Sure.
He's frustrated at his job, and he wants to try to figure out what's next. And he thinks he wants to quit, but he's not sure. So he hires a coach to help him find the courage that he can't find on his own. Little does he know, he's about to be fired in just 5 days. So the plot twists with a bit of a life after career death story, as these two men discover how to make life easier. And through this narrative, 60 ways to make your work life work for you emerge. And they emerge from the story, much like The Goal, right? I think back to the story in The Goal, where the lead character in the story, he's a CEO of a B2B organization, and he gets an unexpected babysitting assignment to watch a bunch of Boy Scouts on a weekend. He didn't know he was going to have to do this. And so he goes on a hike with these Boy Scouts, and you know the story. And it illuminates in this hike why his business is not functioning at optimum efficiency. And it's this eye-opening story. And he discovers these pretty sophisticated business concepts in the context of hanging out on a hike with some Boy Scouts. And I thought, wow, that is so cool. What if I could share a story that illustrates points from the narrative, from the characters, from actual events and observations that I've made as a coach to senior executives, but also the observations that I've made in being coached and helping people through some very, very difficult circumstances. Because even when life throws you a curve, even when you're up against it, even when you're in the middle of challenges, and whatever those challenges might be, those challenges could be, it could be a divorce, it could be a lawsuit, it could be a challenging employee, it could be a number of different things. It could be that your sandwich is cold that you ordered at lunch. I mean, it could be, we got challenges all over the place.
Sure. Life, that's life. Right.
That's life, right? But how you show up, in spite of your circumstances is the key to your success, the key to creating relationships that are meaningful, the key to creating organizations that have a culture of high performance. And all of those themes are explored in the book in the course of this journey where these two characters discover how to make life easier, but it doesn't have a Hollywood ending. It's not like all tidy and everything. Like, oh, I got coaching, and then the world opened up and angels started singing.
That's right. Sure.
Because
the IRS sent me the refund I wasn't expecting.
That's right. That's right. So, I mean, the book challenges still exist.
Sure.
But the way that the characters in the story show up, and quite frankly, the way that hopefully readers can show up in the midst of difficult circumstances is the change that is the promise inside of easier.
Hey, pardon the interruption. It'll just be a beat. We want to tell you about something that's really exciting, and it might be very exciting to you if you're the owner, CEO, leader of a B2B company, roughly with $2 to $20 million in revenue, and you feel a little bit stuck. You know what I mean? Sales are a little flat, maybe even declining, challenged. Margins are being squeezed. Sales cycles seem to be lengthening, and lead flow is uncertain. We've designed a program based on over a dozen years of us doing exactly this for many B2B companies. It's called the Competitive Edge Program, and you can learn more about it at valueprop.com/edge. Tells you all about the program. It's a 90-day program, really focused on helping you sharpen your value proposition, aligning your value delivery, making sure your marketing program is doing what it has to do if you're in B2B, which is generate opportunities, and make sure your sales process is tight so that you can convert those opportunities into sales. So with that note, let's get back to an exciting episode of the Revenue Throughput Podcast. Well, an observation and then two quick questions, right? So one is, I love the fact that the title is easier, which is a relative judgment as opposed to easy, which is a completely different promise. And you alluded to that, right? So the fact is, some things we do in life are hard. Some moments in life are challenging, and they're just going to be challenging. But to make it easier, it's kind of the idea of loosening the bowstrings just a little bit. You can't be at full tension all the time. You can't function that way. So I love the promise of that. So my first question is there one or two, I'm not going to take the thunder from the 60 different principles, is there one or two principles from the book that you could share with us, just so we get a flavor of the kind of insight we might get as we learn more about the book and what and candidly, Chris, what your message to the world, your story?
The first thing that I want to share is a premise in the book, and it's this: you don't have to go it alone. So many times as leaders, owner-operators of B2B companies, executives, it looks like if it's got to be, it's up to me, right? We've all got to do, we got to lift it. We're all Atlas, and we've all got to lift the world by ourselves. That's not easier. You see, hard is a habit, but it doesn't have to be. And all around us are people who are willing to help, who are able to help. And for whatever reason, we don't always see it. We don't always pursue that assistance. We don't always reach out. And when I say we, I'm talking about me as well, right? So that's one thing that it's, life gets easier when you realize that you don't have to go it alone. And that I think that's something that's very, very important. I also think that where you are is not who you are. It's easy to get an attachment to our careers, our home address, right? The school that we went to or the school that our kids go to. That's our identity. But where you are is not who you are. And when we understand that our identity is what leads to impact, which that's totally counterintuitive, because you go, no, the actions that I take is what leads to impact. But where do those actions come from? We become a human doing when we understand that we are human beings. And that really points towards identity. And I hope I'm saying this in the right way, that it doesn't come across like identity in terms of an ego exercise of whatever it says on my business card, that's my identity. I'm talking about our ability to connect with the humanity that connects us all. And when we see that our humanity is what connects us all, things get easier.
Well, I love that, Chris, a lot. And one thing that it brings to mind is when you talk about identity, is my value, like in the universe, is not based on what I do. That I have intrinsic value. That whole idea of intrinsic value. And I've seen a lot of high performers kind of running away or running hard because they feel they have to catch up with an image in their mind of what would make them valuable for some reason. And that may be a driver, and some people do high performance because, my parents never loved me the way I thought I should be loved. And you're seeking that kind of acceptance. And so, not to over psychoanalyze the thing, but I think there's a real power in saying, okay, let's take a pause moment. And I'm hearing from you, and say, you are valuable, and you're not alone. And I think that's a really powerful messages there, Chris. I think everybody needs to hear that, because it is challenging. The last 2 years have been gruesome for a lot of people. It's been really hard.
Absolutely true. I couldn't agree with you more there. That's right. And it seems like we owe it to ourselves to find some personal freedom and to find some fluidity to help us explore some new possibilities. I don't know. It's so funny. I mean, this is the book that I wrote, but it's also the book that I need to read.
Okay, sure.
You know what I'm saying? Because for the exact reasons that you're saying, I need to be reminded that I'm not in this alone. I need to be reminded that I have intrinsic value, that my value is not just based on the actions that I take or the money that I make. There's, and that's one of the themes that keeps showing up in the book. One of the observations is that it's easy to see the perfection in nature. It's easy to see the simple perfection in a flock of birds, or the way that the waves hit the shore, or the trees that are right outside my window here. I can see them right now, and they're absolutely perfect. But we don't see the perfection inside our own human nature. And that may sound like I'm trying to be motivational or trying to pump people up and be like, hey, you're perfect and stuff like that. We all know that we make mistakes.
Right.
But isn't it also true that we are part of the same nature that I just described? We have a resourcefulness inside of us that we rarely tap into, that we rarely recognize, because we're so busy punishing ourselves, beating ourselves up. When I say ourselves, I'm talking about me. I'm talking about me too. I'm talking about, for the longest time, I looked at my life as an error that needed to be corrected, a variance that needed to be tamped down, if you know what I'm saying. I was a problem that needed to be solved. And I'm just going to say this as simply as I can. When I realized that I wasn't a problem that needed to be solved, that I wasn't out of variance, what showed up? Acceptance. And what happened in my life? It got easier.
I love it.
We fall into a trap. I mean, you know what I'm saying? There's a trap. We think that pressure is what we need. Pressure is the key to high performance. What if it's not? What if it's not true that having a gun to your head makes you perform better? Nobody performs well when somebody's got a gun to their head. But I do that all the time.
Right.
I'm like, you got to get this done. You got to, and one of the things that's been part of the personal journey that I've been on, and the journey that I help my clients to go on, is to say, what happens when that pressure stops? The deadline doesn't stop. The deliverable, the due date doesn't stop, but you change your relationship with what it is that you're on about, and you show up differently. That's a different identity, rather than being the person who lives under the gun. Look, if being hard on yourself going to work, it would have worked by now. Am I right?
Right. No, that's a very good point. If whatever you were doing was the answer, you probably wouldn't be looking for another answer. You wouldn't be asking these questions. And I think the metaphor, the gun to the head. If you really think about that literally, I can't imagine like disarming a bomb with a gun to my head, or something like that, right? Like, I don't know about anybody else. Maybe somebody's a stone cold brain surgeon could do it, you know, but I think most people in that moment, there's a greater likelihood you're going to freeze than actually be fluid in motion and so on. And yet when you look at somebody like a musician, I'm not gifted that way, but I've seen them that they talk about being in the zone.
Yeah.
And it's easy, and they're playing masterful pieces and so on because they are in their joy. They're enjoying what they're doing. And I've seen that in business. Some people really just enjoy the strategy, the game, all of that. And it's just fun for them to do what they're doing versus, boy, I got to do this now or else. The or else is a really tough rock to carry around with you.
Yeah, I agree. Boy, you got to drop those two words. You got to drop the or else. Yeah. And, you know, another thing that shows up for me, and it's a story in the book. My dad was a field goal kicker. He kicked field goals in college. And I talked to him about the experience of, you know, when the game's on the line. Let's say you're behind by 1 point and you're coming on the field and you kick a field goal. That's 3 points. You win the game. You're the hero. So I said, you know, where do you put your attention when it comes time to step onto that? Because that's a high stakes, high pressure situation.
Sure.
And I said, you know, do you think about the crowd? Do you think about being the hero or being, you know, the person that everybody's pissed at because you missed the field goal? I mean, what is it that shows up for you? And he says, you already know the answer, Chris. Keep your eye on the ball.
Yeah.
Play the game. You know,
Don't
it's
miss
not about
the kick. Don't miss the
don't miss the kick. And how do you not miss the kick? The answer is, but you got to get out of your head. You can't be thinking about the crowd. You can't be thinking about, you know, you can't be putting a gun to your head when you've got to perform. And that's the same thing. And I think these musicians, there's a reason why they call it playing music, because these great musicians, it's play. Their work is play. And I've met other business owners that I've spoken to, and I ask them this question. It's very telling. I say, do you feel like your work is play?
Mm.
And if you can get close to yes on that answer, that's how you know that somebody is in the zone, in that zone that you're talking about. So,
right. And you know, if I'm honest, not that you've asked me this question, put me on the spot on my own podcast, but I've definitely had moments where the answer would be a 10, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10. Yes, it's fluid, it's happening, it's great, it's fun, it couldn't be better. And there are other moments which are on the other end of that continuum. So finding that to lean into that more and remembering it more, and then adjusting toward that reality more is just a better way to be. And you know, but I admit it hasn't always been easy to like capture that in a bottle, you know, on demand. Sometimes it's you know, sometimes it's challenging to be in just that fun play zone professionally. It just isn't always easy.
You're absolutely right, because life isn't easy. But I mean, what we're talking about is what we know to be true. And asking yourself a simple question in a difficult situation can really open up possibilities. And here's that question: what could make this easier? What could make this easier? And how is it that I am putting a gun to my head when I should be playing a game? What would happen if I were not lost in thought, thinking about the implications of me making this field goal or playing this guitar solo or whatever? And I just got on about the business of living or working or doing what needs to be done. You know, that's a question I ask my clients all the time. What needs to be done? When our thinking slows down, what needs to be done typically shows up.
Love it.
And, you know, it's just a matter, but it's not easy to find that place.
Right.
You're absolutely right.
Wow. Well, Chris, look, we could go on for a long time on this conversation, but we are just about out of our time here. So I would love for anybody listening to this, one, to know where to get the book. So tell us about where exactly they should go to get the book. And if anybody wanted to connect with you, how they should do that.
Well, you can find the book online at Amazon, of course, and it's in Kindle format as well as audiobook. You can also buy it at Barnes & Noble or wherever you purchase books. The book's website is easier-book.com. And if you go on that website, there's a mini course you can sign up for. It's 4 videos that can help you to make life a little bit easier. And that's just something that I offer to folks who might be interested in purchasing the book. My website is westfallonline.com. And if anything that we've talked about resonates with anybody out there, if you go on my website, there's a contact button in the lower right-hand corner, and you can just click on that. And if you'd like to set up a time to talk, I'm happy to arrange 30 minutes to go over whatever challenges you might be facing, because I've spent my days looking in the direction of success. And if that conversation might be of interest to anybody who's listening, I welcome that opportunity.
Fantastic. Chris Westfall, thank you so much for being part of our podcast today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Hey, thanks for listening to another episode of the Revenue Throughput Podcast. If you like this episode and if you like the series, make sure you subscribe below. And also, if you liked it, please do review it. When people are looking for something exciting to listen to, especially the kind of content we're bringing, which is practical insights for B2B companies, this is a place and a free resource that they can take advantage of. Let them know about it with your review. So subscribe, review, enjoy. Thanks again.